Two, three, four. 2, 3, 4. Two, three, four.
Okay, cool. Well, you got it to work, yeah. Well, I think this might be okay. As long as the speaker's not distorted, we're good. Yeah.
Those guys were just blindly
Doing a rainy day. You gonna walk away from the podium at all, or? No, I was maybe a little bit. Maybe I just have it up here. This light's on.
Okay, if we could have your attention. We had decided to wait, not start at 2 o'clock because some people had problems parking and whatever, and so that's why the delay. So nonetheless, you all got good seats in the meantime, so that's great. So I'm Ron Miller, and I'm the Forest Lake American Legion Post chaplain here, and so we welcome you to our humble abode, and this is a program that has gone on for quite a few years now, and it is a great program, and thank you all for coming. So one of the first things we're going to do is have the Polaris Sea Cadets post the colors, and we'll also have, there's a South Vietnamese contingent in there with the U.S. flag and a South Vietnamese flag, our allies back in the Vietnam War. And so they're going to post colors, so if everyone would please stand and face the colors over here. Color guard, post colors.
Mark time. March. Ready. Halt. Right. Face. Present. Arms. Color guard. Post the colors. Ready. 2.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the rampart hearts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Jess Costner. Please stay standing and let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Join me in that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Two. Let us pray. O Lord our God, I give you thanks for bringing each and every one of us here today. There's many other things that people could do instead of here, but we that are here realize the importance of what happened in the Vietnamese War. And we know the people who have given all, and some who have returned and had problems. We pray for them, Lord. And we pray for their families. And we pray for all of us, and then we pray for our country. And we pray for those that were left in Vietnam, so the Vietnamese folks who had lost the war and they were stuck in their place. We pray for them, and we pray for those who were able to immigrate, such as those that are here with us today. We thank you for blessing them and that they are able to come with us. So Lord, we thank you, and we pray for this program, and I pray for you. Thank you for the Sea Cadets who were able to do this here today from Cambridge. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Color guard, dismissed.
Ready, 2. For arms. Left, base. Forward, march. On left, march. Ready, halt.
Go ahead and take your seats, please. Our Master of Ceremony today, she has flown in to be with us. She's a U.S. diplomat, which means that she's a current member of the United States Foreign Service, where she carries the equivalent rank of a lieutenant colonel. Since graduating from Forest Lake High School in 1999, yes, she's one of our Forest Lake graduates. Her name is Nicole Finneman. She has served our country across 4 continents in more than 9 countries, protecting American interests and defending democracy. Her tours of duty include some of the most challenging countries in the world, like North Korea, Afghanistan, and Cuba. In the last year, Nicole has delivered 2 historic presidential summits for the White House with heads of states from the Americas. Nicole also has a deep personal connection to this day, which she will mention to us as she comes up. Let's welcome Nicole.
Thank you, Chaplain. It is truly my honor honor to be here with you all today. And my hope, I will let you in on why during the course of this program. I know there have been a number of 50-year commemorations, but this year, this March, it will be 50 years since the last U.S. troops left Vietnam soil, March 29th, 1973. Those that left March 29th became just the latest in over 3 million young servicemen and women who left their families to serve bravely a world away from everything they knew and everyone they loved, only to come home to face treatment unbefitting their courage. I'm not the crier in my family, but that that rendition of the national anthem is going to stay with me for a while. These young servicemen and women returned home to face treatment unbefitting their courage and a welcome unworthy of their example. Many returned to no welcome at all. So let's not bury the lead. It took too long for the recognition to come and our nation to realize and recognize that our Vietnam vets served with pride and honor, same as the greatest generation. Today and every March for the last 16 years, this community has come together to right that wrong. That's why we're all here. It's who we are all here for. So, Vietnam veterans, those of you who can, please let's get kicked off the right way. Would you please stand and let us recognize you? Let us thank you. Welcome home. Welcome home. Welcome home. I always cry in that part in this program. All the crying is out of the way now, right? I want to thank you. And as we come of age with this program, I want to thank you not only for your service and for your sacrifice, for all of it, for everything you've become and all that you've overcome to be all that you are, for your stories, the ghosts that we know you carry, and the lessons you teach because you've carried them. In 2008, Minnesota was a leader in this country for states. We passed, people in this room passed, the law that proclaims March 29th as Vietnam Veterans Day in Minnesota. The nation did follow. It did follow in multiple presidential administrations afterwards, but Minnesota was among the first. This community was among the first. And since that month, it was March 27th that the law passed in 2008, is when I signed up for the Foreign Service. Since then, I have had the honor to serve my country as a diplomat in the Foreign Service, including, as you heard, in some pretty raunchy places. Like you, vets, I swore an oath to defend and protect my country, its constitution, American citizens, and interests abroad. And I have been so proud to do so on 4 continents. I've seen amazing things. I have witnessed history and human triumph. It is awesome sometimes. I've also served in 2 war zones, taken incoming. I was separated from my family. Side note, my husband and 1- and 3-year-old had to evacuate in the middle of the night one night, and Forest Lake received them. My family received them. My extended family received them. And they had to spend 6 months knowing that I was taking incoming under mortar fire, and me knowing that they were in the right community. I've also been spied on so very much. And much of my career I've spent in countries who enjoy little to no democracy, no freedom. In the dictatorships of Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Zimbabwe, and North Korea, yes, I have a bit of a track record, fear and propaganda reign. It's in those places I've had the privilege to know and work with brave journalists who risk everything to get the truth out there, to tell the truth. Democracy and freedom, things we all can agree matter above all else, are worth fighting for, are enjoyed by too few. They're still dreams to too many. In this career, there's been defeat. We've lost. I've lost. I've seen death. I've lost friends. I've known too many people who've been disappeared. There are times when it gets really hard. And when it is, and this is not me just telling you this, but this is why I flew here, when it is, I attribute my ability to navigate the messy complexity, the high stakes, the uncertain future. I attribute my ability to get up in the morning on those days, to find clarity, to find my compass, to know what I'm fighting for and what I value, to your experience, the Vietnam vet experience. If you haven't made the connection yet with my last name, I grew up with your heroic, messy, inspiring story. I didn't learn about the Vietnam War from a textbook or a movie, but from vets, from you. I grew up with the twins platoon. Thank you, Christy Sorrow. And who else in recent history, in American history, faced a greater test of personal values than the teenagers we sent off to Vietnam? And when has the need been greater to adapt and innovate to survive than it was to undertake combat in Vietnam? Vietnam veterans are examples of the best we can be, especially when times are dark, when no one else will comfort or validate you, but you know what's right and you persevere. Your story, now mixed with my own, is what gives me crystal clarity about why I am a patriot. Your story inspires me to keep serving. It's why I'm honored and humbled to be with you today, and thank you. I knew if I was given the chance to stand here and show you, almost like a mirror, just one example of what your story means to us, that I needed to try. We have so many VIPs in this room today. They all just stood, right? I wish I could call each and every one of you out, from our veterans to the ones who have done right by you that are in this room, to our Gold Star families. In the years since we've had this program, we've had Afghan, Iraq combat vets as well. And I am going to take you a little detour on that note. Something that means a lot to me, that I get as a value from Vietnam and learned from you all and from this community. In 2006, Congress, because of US military lobbying, passed a law that said any Iraq or Afghan troop who embedded with US combat forces, who risked their own lives to save our own, and who faced existential threat as a result, deserved what we call a special immigrant visa to come to the United States. If they bled, if they were hunted, and if they saved our lives, America wanted to open its doors to save theirs. When I arrived in Afghanistan in 2013, and from 2013 to 2014, US troops had gotten quite upset that we were behind. Now, there are a few ugly sides to bureaucracy, and this is one. The paperwork had made us woefully behind, and Congress was shining a spotlight on Afghanistan especially. We were way behind. Too many of the Afghan forces who had embedded with our battalions were waiting for their special immigrant visa This is, go back to 2013 and 2014, all right? Things are different now, and it is a different story. I'm referring to those troops. I was part of a small team where, among other responsibilities, we were asked to catch up, just catch up, clear that backlog. Get every brave Afghan troop who had truly put their life and their families' lives on the line to help our troops safely out. It was and is our American value to do right by them, and we had gotten behind. As we worked around the clock to catch up on over 10 years, I can tell you that there were names that I called who didn't live to receive the phone call. There were names we called, and by the following week, when they were to come in and pick up their passport with that visa, with that ticket to America, they had been hunted and killed in that time. It wasn't easy. Yet, of the thousands that I did talk to, every single one of them was so proud to have been fighting on the right side of history. They had become so close with their American battalions whom they were embedded with. There were more than a few firstborn children named after U.S. soldiers. Years later, back in the United States, I went to a service day for my husband's company, and there was this family. And this man, Afghan man, approached me, and he recognized me. He recognized me as the last American he saw before he got his ticket, and he left Afghanistan. And as I sat there and met his kids, and the oldest of which was the same age as mine, all of them named after Americans whom he had served with, I saw how grateful, and he mentioned how grateful he was and everything that he has done with that ticket, and how that experience has changed, obviously, his life for the better. As I've been in my own trenches fighting for our American values alongside those who share them with us, I can tell you that the mutual respect between those who are fighting for the same thing, for what's right, that's unbreakable. And I took that little detour, thank you for letting me, because it's one example of how we live today, the very values and lessons in America that Vietnam solidified for us. For the resettlement of Vietnamese, Laotian, Hmong, Cambodian allies was, and maybe still is, the largest in US history. For those of you who were here a few years ago, I know it was pretty powerful when members of the Army of the Republic of Vietnam joined us for the first time to pay their respects to you. These allied forces fought alongside us against communist aggression and for their freedom, something we all value above all else. And when Saigon fell, ARVN faced imprisonment, re-education, it's a nice word for slavery, and worse, at the hands of the North Vietnamese Army, because they had fought with us, US imperialists. But what could the US do? What was the American thing to do? And I took that detour because that is just one of the many reasons that your story continues to give, make people like me proud to present, represent, and serve this country. And again, because we are joined today, Pak Nguyen, contingent of the veterans of the ARVN, our allies are here with us, and if it's okay with you, I'd ask that you stand so that we thank you. This program has grown into something so meaningful and so educational over these last 16 years. Vietnam was unlike every war that preceded it, right? I spent a lot of time in the Korean Peninsula. There is little to no similarities in the landscape. Soldiers in Vietnam quickly had to adapt to fight and survive in a type of warfare that had never been fought before. We hear so much about innovation today and the need for innovation. It's such a sexy buzz term. They were innovating and adapting under the most stressful of circumstances in a landscape we had no experience in. And we have so much to learn from all of these stories. In the past years, that's why I love this program. This stage has been home to the undertold stories of Vietnam. Canine units, nurses and medics, tunnel rats, POWs, This stage has been telling undertold stories from Vietnam. There's so much to learn. No Ken Burns documentary, no matter how many years long it might be, could possibly cover. And yet this stage is doing it, and you are coming here for it. I especially love how we tie the past to the future. And every year since 2008, the Minnesota Vietnam Veterans Charity has sponsored a scholarship contest. So we get an opportunity to witness firsthand a high school senior learning about your stories. We are thrilled today to have Tom Edwards be our guest speaker, and a high school senior inspired quite recently to learn about that very thing that you're here to talk to us about for the first time. This is just one beautiful way our communities program connects the past to the future. And the special theme for this year that I've already predated is a surprising story of innovation, the Swift boat. Something that did not need to exist before the conflict in Vietnam had begun, and had to be commissioned after the fighting had already started. This year's essay contest asked why swift boats were important in Vietnam. In 500 words, through research and documentation, students were asked to state the case for why this naval operation was vital to the war effort in Vietnam, and identify specific engagements or battles where swift crews fought with valor in support of their mission. After speaking to the judges of this year's competition, I have it on good authority that it was quite steeply competitive. There were many high school seniors in our community who wanted to undertake this research challenge. I love that. And now it's time for me to invite this year's essay contest winner, Forest Lake Senior High School senior, Jacob Meyer, to the stage. Please, Jacob, will you join us? I would like to stand at the podium now, Jacob. We are delighted, as you heard me say, to have you here. Before you read, can I put you on the spot?
Sure, go ahead.
Why? You're busy. You're a high school senior. You've got plans. He's going to attend the University of Minnesota in the fall, everybody. He also was 17 when he wrote this essay. Jacob is a newly minted 18-year-old. Why did you want to write this essay?
I initially heard about the essay because one of my old history teachers sent the prompt to me from the scholarship, and I remember reading it and having pretty much no idea what it was about. So I did my preliminary research, and I discovered the rich and interesting history it had, and I just felt compelled to learn more and write my essay.
Should we hear it? Let's hear it. Jacob.
Why swift boats were important in Vietnam. Vast mountain landscapes, lush green jungles, monsoons that berate the earth relentlessly. When looking back on the Vietnam War, this is the picture painted. Although these geographical characteristics are fundamental to understanding the Vietnam conflict, one piece of the puzzle often gets overlooked: the vast river systems and inland waterways spanning over 1,500 miles. More specifically, how the United States' use of swift boats supported ground troops, prevented enemy advances, and aided the war effort. Swift boats first arrived in Vietnam in October of 1965 to be used as a coastal patrol during Operation Market Time, which aimed to stop the flow of North Vietnamese troops and materials. Swift boats patrolled waterways and boarded Vietnamese vessels as they encountered to search for contraband. Due to their small footprint, swift boats had crews of just 6 and had to stay in shallow inland waters. Their thin aluminum hulls were equipped with 2 machine guns and a mortar, and they sailed in small groups of 3 to 5 to stay better protected. As unarmored vehicles, they were prone to Viet Cong ambushes, incoming fire, and naval mines. However, their stealth and speed made up for their defensive shortcomings. As the war progressed, swift boats were used to transport Allied forces and deploy Navy SEALs into sensitive areas. Eventually, as the United States began to withdraw from the war, swift boats were slowly phased out and became a relic of the past. The naval operations by the United States in Vietnam were essential to the war effort. Had the United States Navy not taken action, Northern Vietnamese forces would have gained total control over the waterways and transport systems. Swift boats allowed the United States to stifle the transport of North Vietnamese arms and munitions, significantly reducing their ability to advance farther. Swift boats were an indispensable piece of the American war effort. Each swift boat crew was subject to grueling conditions and dangerous situations. One example of heroism demonstrated by swift crews occurred in June of 1967 with PCF-97. In 24 hours, PCF-97 came under heavy fire from Viet Cong ambushes multiple times while undergoing surveillance activities. Although their ship was damaged, they continued their mission to complete their initial goal. The heroic men on this crew put themselves in a highly vulnerable position. However, their actions were imperative to stopping Northern Vietnamese forces from seizing the waterways. The valor displayed by this swift crew is a testament to the sacrifices that countless others made to ensure our safety. Swift boats were a vital part of American Vietnam involvement that is too often overlooked. Had it not been for the diligent work of the United States Navy, American ground forces would have been subject to even more severe challenges. The bravery that swift crews exhibited is nothing short of incredible. When discussing the Vietnam War, it is not only necessary to draw attention to the forces on the mainland, but also to recognize the heroism exhibited by swift boats on the rivers. Thank you.
Stay here for a second. This is one of my favorite traditions now. We're going to invite Terry Kibioya to the stage. It is so special that the president of Minnesota's Vietnam Veterans Charity, who sponsors this scholarship in honor of somebody we're going to learn about a lot, Rocky Lindberg, that he is here in person to do this. Terry?
Thank you. On behalf of Minnesota Vietnam Veterans Charity, I want to present you with your scholarship check, $500, and wish you good luck at the U of M. Go Gophers. Matter of fact, I hope they do well this next weekend out in Florida. I read your write-up on the swift boats, and I thought, wow, you did a terrific job, and I want to thank you for that. Thank you. As long as I'm up here, I'm going to take a moment for a new event that we're going to participate in, at least this year. And I would like to start by saying I appreciate what Nicole mentioned about where you've been, things you've done. And I thought about my daughter, who's a Navy corpsman, stationed at Camp Lejeune. And last year, we went to visit her. I got a text at the Minneapolis airport saying, I just got tasked. That must be a Navy term, because I didn't know what she meant. We got to North Carolina. She was late getting home that day. And when she did get home about 8 o'clock, she said, I'm getting deployed tomorrow morning. So she had time to pack that evening. We welcomed her, we said goodbye. At 7 o'clock, she was off. Turned out she ended up in Virginia to welcome Afghan refugees there, and she spent about 4 months up there giving them inoculations and stuff like that. So she did her part with the Afghans, and I'm very proud of her. One of the things I'd like to do now is welcome up, well, is it Tia Schultz, and her mother, Jody. Would you please come up? One of the new things that we're participating in this year is a recognition from the Department of Defense in honor of Vietnam veterans that have succumbed to Agent Orange. And I would like to present this on behalf of Grateful Nation and the Department of Defense. We honor your sacrifices at home while your spouse served in the name of freedom and democracy during the Vietnam War period. Our nation is forever indebted to you and presents its deepest respect and admiration. We are honored today to present you with the certificate of honor along with this pin. This is the pin, and this is the award from the Department of Defense.
Thank you.
Congratulations. We appreciate your service, your husband's service, and congratulations.
Thank you.
I just want to take one more moment as president of Minnesota Vietnam Veterans Charity. Some of you may know we sponsor honor flights. Our next honor flight will be September 11th. And if anybody knows a World War II veteran or Korean veteran that's able to go, please have them, or you can help them get online and go to twincityhonorflight.org, get registered. If they're a World War II veteran, we'll get them on that flight this year to Washington, D.C. to see their memorials. So please, if you're a Korean vet that happens to be here, if you know one, please have them register as well. We're also taking terminal Vietnam vets. Thank you very much.
Jody, I just want to repeat the thank you for your service and your whole family's service as well. We would love to learn more about Rocky. And for that, I invite daughter and granddaughter of this year's essay contest and scholarship honoree, Rocky Lindberg, Rena and Tia, to the stage.
Hello, everyone. I am Taya Schlunt. I am the youngest of three, and my father was Rocky. I'm going to cry. Thanks, Nicole, for setting the stage. I just want to say that we're honored that we're here today to talk about my dad. And with that being said, this is my daughter, Rena. Some call her my mini-me, but she's 8 years old, and she loved my dad. And so she's actually going to read the speech today to honor him.
As an 8-year-old, I lost my best friend at my age. Some might say that best friends come and go, which sometimes they do. One day it's my brother Brody, and the next day it's my dog Lou. But the truth is, Grandpa Rocky was everything to me. So to be standing here today and share his story with you is an honor. My grandpa Rolland Rocky Lee Lindberg was born July 30th, 1949 in St. Croix Falls, Wisconsin, to Lester and Fernette Lindberg. He grew up in the Schaefer area and was the youngest of 5 kids, with 2 brothers and 2 sisters. When Grandpa was in kindergarten, he lost his dad in a motor vehicle accident in 1968. At the age of 18, he joined the U.S. Marine Corps. Grandpa served 2 tours in Vietnam as a staff sergeant, and after returning home, joined the Army Reserve and gave another 10 years to his country. Grandpa returned home from Vietnam. He met my Grandma Jody at a bowling alley, and after several failed attempts to get her attention, the rest became history. They got married in 1974 and had 3 children, every pet you could imagine, and built their life in Linwood, Minnesota, owner of Forest Lake Contracting. Grandpa had a career in road construction and eventually became superintendent and a part owner of Forest Lake Contracting, where he returned from in 2008. He was actively involved in his community and was a member of the American Legion VFW, Cooties Local 49, El Grove Adventures, and Pioneer Motorhome Club. He was also a former pack master and scout master of Boy Scout Troop 435 in Linwood. Not only did Grandpa give his time to the community, he also gave it to his church. He was a member of the Sunnyside Free Lutheran Church in Linwood since 1983, where he served as both trustee and deacon. Lutheran. I guess you could say those are big chapters of his life, but what I really want to share with you is the pages in between. My grandpa Rocky was humble, was a small town boy from Schaefer, Minnesota, and grew up in a world where he didn't really stand a chance. He figured out very early on that if he wanted a life he could be proud of, it was up to him to make it. He joined the Marines, dedicated himself to his country, and built a life for his family. My mom often told stories about how, as a kid, Grandpa would drive them around to job sites and give food to the homeless people that lived there. Grandpa understood what it was like to have nothing, and he understood the pain that life could bring, and he wanted to make it better for the next person. My grandpa was quick-witted. It didn't matter if you knew him for 5 minutes or 5 years. At some point, he was going to pull a prank on you. About 4 years ago, Grandpa told me the story of a little man named Mr. McGillicuddy who lived in the woods behind his house. The thing about Mr. McGillicuddy is that he had a treasure chest full of chocolate coins. Every time I was going to Grandma and Grandpa's house, we were on a mission to find that chest. We followed the pink ribbons, studied the treasure map, even set up traps to find Mr. McGillicuddy. But somehow Grandpa was the only one that ever saw him. In fact, Grandpa would tell me stories about Mr. McGillicuddy all the time, and the more he would tell me, the more he would laugh. Mr. McGillicuddy was gracious. My grandpa was gracious. When my mom asked how we would describe Grandpa, the first thing my brother said was selfless. At 11 years old, he realized that Grandpa never thought of himself. How often it was that Grandpa was doing projects for other people, between fixing driveways, hauling stuff, plowing snow, fixing equipment, or cutting wood. At 72 years old, he never stopped working. Every day he was going to do something for someone else, and he loved it. Grandpa was a man of service. In fact, in 1976, Grandpa Rocky was awarded the No Greater Love Award, which was to honor an outstanding Vietnam veteran in the state of Minnesota who gave back to their community. This award was presented to him at the state capitol. Governor Rudy Perpich. My grandpa was a leader. In the Bible, James 2:17 says that it isn't enough to just have faith. Faith that doesn't show itself by good deeds is no faith at all. It is dead and useless. My grandpa Rocky took that verse to heart. He knew that to live out God's will for his life, he needed to do something. And in a way, he would honor the gifts God had given him. Grandpa never waited for someone else to do what he knew he could do. He lived a life that was an example for all of us. As my dad once said, my whole life I was told what to do, and Rocky never told me what to do. He showed me how to live. It's been just over a year since God called my grandpa home, and I miss him every single day. I miss walking into their house and having Grandpa say, "Well, I suppose we should take a car ride," which really meant, "Quick, let's go get Dairy Queen before Grandma stops us." And I miss the text messages he would send me of the talking emoji he created. I told my mom once that I was jealous that he got to have Grandpa as her dad. And when she asked why, the only thing I could say is that because she got to have him longer. Grandpa was a humble, honest man of integrity who lived out his life for God and country. So today, as we honor my best friend, I want to say thank you for allowing his legacy to live on.
Let's hear for Rocky. I have an 8-year-old daughter, and Rena, you did so good. Your grandpa would be so proud. You also received a standing ovation, and your grandpa just received a standing ovation. So congratulations and really well done.
I'm Director of Education Tom Frezza from the National Museum of the U.S. Navy, and today we're here to talk about PCF number 1, or Patrol Craft Fast number 1.
I do think we lost some power. That's okay. You did get to see, briefly, a swift boat. And we have quite the expert that I'm about to introduce. And we also have a whole lot of visual materials on display to the stage left over here. So if it's all right, I'm going to rob you of those 2 next minutes. It was going to be a short video. All right. We will work it out for Terry. It's not. Thank you, everyone. Our guest speaker today, Tom Edwards, is a retired aerospace engineer who has received a number of environmental awards from the City of San Diego and the State of California, and is now a freelance writer and photographer for 5 magazines. But my favorite parts about getting to know Tom, he was a swift boat electrician, and he has been writing about it and telling us far better than this video could do in those magazines that he's been writing, and he has been educating, and he's very connected to the roughly 3,500, what remains of our 3,500 servicemen who served in the swift boat community in Vietnam. Tom translated his experience in Vietnam on swift boats to a career in aerospace. He translated that survival humor, I'm getting to know, to, and you knew I was gonna say this, to stand-up comedy a few times. And he translated his perseverance and his perspective to beating cancer. Not one, not two, 3 times. I know you're sitting next to the secret for it all, his lovely wife, Kathy. And Tom is going to regale us and teach us something that I'm so excited, that I know Jacob was so excited to learn about. And in this, we all get to learn and pay forward one of the more remarkable innovations from modern times, the swift boat. Tom, come up, teach us. We are your students.
Thank you, Nicole. That's a tough bill to fill, though. I'll do what I can. Jacob, congratulations on a well-earned scholarship. Nikki, I'm glad that crying is okay.
Yeah, set the stage. Appreciate it.
I enlisted in the Navy on February 5th, 1968. That was 3 days after my 19th birthday. Shortly before completing basic training at the Great Lakes Naval Training Center, I received my first set of orders. I was about to become a crew member on the USS Krishna. At the time, that was in a dry dock. If you're not familiar with a dry dock, it's basically a large concrete bowl, and the Krishna was in there. And when it was built, you've probably all seen ships that are landing ship tanks. The 2 front doors open, and the tank rolls out. Troops roll out after, trucks, etc. Well, that's what the Krishna was built as, but during the Vietnam War, when it was in dry dock in Japan, the front doors were welded shut and another deck was added to it, and it became an ARL, Auxiliary Repair Landing Craft. So that was my start on being on the Krishna, and I spent a few months in Japan. That was fun. One of my hobbies is photography, and believe it or not, this is a little hard to believe, but it was not hard to find photography equipment in Japan. Who knew? So that's a hobby that I still enjoy to this day. As Nicole pointed out, I write and do photography for 7 magazines, and I've also had the enormous fun opportunity to do photography with the Vikings and the Twins. So it's been a blast. One of the things I've learned from surviving a war and cancer you have to live every day to the most. When we got to Vietnam, we left Japan at less than blistering 9 knots. For those of you not familiar with knots, that's about 11 miles an hour. On September 24th, 1968, we dropped anchor in An Toi, Vietnam. You see that map over there. That's where my swift boat display is, to the left of that. Your right, my left. I was in An Toi, and that's an island that's west of the Vietnam mainland, and where I was stationed, I was actually closer to Cambodia than I was to Saigon. After about, while we were in Vietnam, as Nicole pointed out, my job was to maintain and repair swift boats, and it was an interesting job. I was not a swift boat crew member. A swift boat, as Jacob pointed out, had 1 officer and 5 enlisted. That's not what I did. As a number of guys in the Vietnam Veterans Group I met have pointed out, I fixed them when they broke them. So I had pretty interesting career in Vietnam. And approximately 3.5 years before my deployment to Vietnam, General William Westmoreland was commander of Military Assistance Command in Saigon, and he had requested shallow watercraft to support the newly formed Coastal Surveillance Force. Their assignment to curtail the flow of Vietnamese troops and supplies via the south and the southern waterways. Prior to their arrival of swift boats in Vietnam, the Viet Cong had unbounded access to rivers, canals, and coastlines for smuggling and infiltration operations. Swift boats very successfully put an end to that. As Nicole had pointed out, swift boats had never been used in a war previous to that. So we learned a lot on the fly, quite frankly. Prior to their arrival, the Navy had tested a variety of boats to address the specific needs of combating that type of guerrilla warfare before opting to utilize a craft that was built by Seward Seacraft, a Louisiana-based manufacturer. And boats very similar to swift boats had been used on oil rigs and so forth, so they weren't coming right off of square one, but swift boats had kind of a platform as to what could be utilized for what they would be doing in Vietnam. The swift boats were transferred to the Philippines, and Anthoy and Da Nang were selected as the two areas most critical to the needs the new craft could address. The 50-foot long, 25-knot, quarter-inch thick hull aluminum swift boats had twin 50 caliber machine guns over the pilot house and a single 50 caliber machine gun over an 81 millimeter mortar on the main deck toward the aft section. I have a display of a swift boat over there. In my case, it's swift boat, PCF-3, Patrol Craft Fast 3. We never called them Patrol Craft Fast. That was the actual Navy name for them. But 3 was the first one that was in Vietnam, so when I had one made, I thought, well, and I worked on PCF-3, so I just thought it would be appropriate to go with that choice. A friend of mine that had been in the Vietnam Veterans Group I'm in, Verge Irwin, was an officer in charge of PCF-67 and is the author of Cat Low. That's one of the books I have on display over there. It's a memoir of invincible youth. I had the pleasure of meeting him in 2007 after I joined the Swift Boat Sailors Association. On the long list of functions swift boats were capable of was rendering humanitarian aid. And so I always found that touching. That meant a lot to me. In his award-winning book, Verge describes an encounter with a large junk during Operation Market Time. Swift boats maintained a 24/7 schedule and interacted with hundreds of junks, which are fishing vessels, and did that on a daily basis. Consequently, keeping swift boats up and running was vital to the new small boat, Crown Water Navy. The majority of the bunks that the swift boat sailors interacted with were legitimate fishermen. That gave the sailors on the swift boats the opportunity to engage in goodwill gestures, such as giving the locals on those boats cigarettes and candy, things of that nature, as they were being inspected for contraband. Upon boarding one of those ships, Verge noticed that he and his translator and a crew member saw a young girl that had been badly burned. Verge and his crew wanted to transfer her to a hospital, but her father resisted. Verge recalled, "I do not think the young girl will live. In my mind, I still see that father cradling her in his arms. I'm sorry." Some memories Verge told me of war don't always happen during combat. That's true. Swift boats were manned by a crew of 6, 1 officer and 5 enlisted, that had to adapt to a part of a new facet of military service. I always found it interesting that 80% of the crews that were on swift boats volunteered for that extremely hazardous duty. From the start of the war when swift boats got there until our last day in Vietnam, there were about 3,500 of us involved in swift boat ops, and of that number, last I checked, about 350 of us are still alive. The next most of swift boat operations was to conduct surveillance along the 1,600 miles of South Vietnamese coastline. Once again, the swift boats delivered. For the sailors aboard the Krishna, our job was to keep swift boats up and running. To a man, we took pride in what we did. Over the years, I've occasionally looked back at that time in Anthoy, and I knew that morale was never a problem. Our crew was tighter than a hat band. We were a good bunch. As an electrician's mate apprentice, I'm confident the $83 that was all mine twice a month was well earned. Big loot. One component of a Swiftboat electrical system was two 24-volt battery banks. They served as the primary source of power for engine starting, navigation lights, radar, and general purpose lighting. The port side batteries were for standby power, and the starboard bank provided general boat power. The wiring configuration ensured both banks could function in parallel to maintain the operation of essential systems. Batteries were located in the aft section of what was called the engine room. I can assure you that was just a euphemism. There were engines in there, but there was no room. So that was never clear on where that name came from, trust me. It's a relative term. In order to access and service the replacement batteries, you had to navigate over and around two 480 horsepower Detroit Marine diesel engines. As a now retired aerospace engineer, I'm confident that when the Swift boats were being designed, the engineers never considered that the electricians working on them weren't former football players. It wouldn't have worked. Fortunately, in my case, I played baseball, and that was 55 years and about 40 pounds ago, so I was able to get back there with very little problem. It wasn't that much of a challenge. Supplies were at times problematic. There wasn't any hardware stores we could go to. I still remember a Swift boat coming back from patrol, and the battery post in the back of the engine room, were, shall we say, in less than ideal condition. The heat and so forth had literally melted them down to where there was barely nothing to it. And looking around the main deck, I could see there were a lot of empty 50 caliber machine gun shells, and I thought, okay, there's the answer to the problem. Necessity is the mother of invention. So I hacksawed off the firing pin of the shell, and then took it over to a grinding wheel and thinned the shell down to a very, very thin level. And then I tapped that down over the battery post, and I took solder, and I poured that into the shell. And then when everything had cooled, I took a chisel and I peeled it off, and there it was. I had a brand new battery post, and the captain saw that, and he just cracked up. And he said, well, that's one way to do it. And I said, hey, if you know where there's a hardware store, let me know where it is. It's got to be easier than this. On December 8th, 1968, my memory isn't this good. I kept the logbook. A former vaudevillian performer, Georgie Jessel, those who are my age in the audience may remember who Georgie was, entertained us at a USO show in Anthoy. I've believed for years that you can never have too much chocolate or too much laughter, and Georgie provided plenty of the second. The following day, PCF returned with heavy damage to the radar and electrical systems. For the Krishna electricians, it was all hands on deck. During the day, typhoon warnings were issued. Life in Vietnam was never boring. The Krishna had port and starboard duty. Every other day, you would stand a 4 or 5 hour watch after what you were doing during the day had been taken care of. On December 20th, I had the mid-watch. That was from midnight until 4 in the morning, and I was up on the bow, the front of the ship, and I had an M16, a machine gun with me, and my job was to make sure that none of the Viet Cong would swim up to the ship and plant explosives on it. So periodically, I didn't have fragmentation grenades, the ones that blow apart and send metal everywhere. The grenades I had, or all of us had, were concussion grenades. You throw those into the water, and it sends out a really, really massive shockwave. To this day, the biggest fish I ever caught was with a concussion grenade. But I understand that's not legal in Minnesota. I'm still kind of new here. So I'm not going to be trying that in any of the 10,000 lakes. So I took, during the evening, I took a concussion grenade, and I thought, well, it's about time, because I would spend sometimes 5 or 10 minutes between throwing them, and then sometimes just a minute. You didn't want to have a set time, obviously. You didn't want anybody to be able to time when you were throwing concussion grenades into the water so they could swim up to the ship. And I pulled the pin, and from the time you pulled the pin until the time you threw it, until it activated, was supposed to be, and supposed to be is the key term there, it was supposed to be 5 or 6 seconds. In this case, it wasn't. I launched it, and it got maybe from me to the front row of seats here, and it detonated, and the shock wave sent me back. I hit into the back of the bulkhead and hit my head really hard, and everybody who was on the Swift boats came running out with 45s and machine guns and so forth, and I told them, no, it's just a short fuse grenade. And I hadn't heard a sound that loud till I sat in row 2 of a Led Zeppelin concert. So that'll give you some frame of reference for those of you that are my age. When I was listening to Led Zeppelin, I didn't do that. It was like, oh, I can hear them just fine, thanks. It was an interesting year, no doubt about it. On May 30th, 1969, I departed the Krishna and flew to Saigon. I'll always call it Saigon. I was on my way back to the States. Dan Daly was the officer in charge of PCF 76. The website for his book, which I also have on display over there, is Whitewater Red Hot Lead. Notes, Whitewater Red Hot Lead is a story about U.S. Navy swift boats in Vietnam in '67 and '68. It's an engaging, fast-paced, nonfiction story that switches gears between character development and intertwined with the rawness of combat, the variances of the landscape with equal measures of romance and humor. And that's something else when I look back at Vietnam, I was kind of the ship's comedian for some reason. And the captain, after a firefight one day, he came over and he put his arm around me. He says, well, he says, you're nuts, but I'm glad you're on our side. Thanks for keeping us laughing, because when the firefight was done, the Viet Cong went that way and we went that way. So when it got library quiet in a very loud voice, I said, that's it. Next summer I'm spending my vacation in another country. Captain thought that was pretty cool. And you had to keep it light there. And I mentioned the morale and so forth. We got along extremely well. And with the Vietnam Veterans Group I'm in now, it's the same thing. I didn't serve with any of the members of that group, but we've gotten together very closely in a very short amount of time. We have a common frame of reference. As I say, there's only 350 of us still alive that were involved in swiftboat operations. So those of us that are there, trust me, these people know how to have fun. One of my degrees is in sociology, and I never took that up as a profession, but I got the degree, and I thought, I think I got in the wrong line here. So I got an engineering degree, and then that's how I wound up in the spacecraft business. But one of the things that has always interested me about, as somebody with a sociology degree, is how well every single Vietnam veteran I know has turned out. We've turned out well. Fred Smith is the founder and the CEO of FedEx, and Fred got the idea for FedEx when he was in his second tour of duty in Da Nang, and he saw the Marines moving material from this point to this point and that point to that point, and he was doing that as bullets were flying. And Fred thought, I bet I could do that without bullets flying. And that's literally how FedEx came to be. And Fred is on I wrote an article about that for Vietnam Magazine, and Fred sent me an email, and he appreciated it. He said that was very nice. But and I've noticed that with the members of the group I'm in. We've done well. We've landed on our feet, and as I've told people over the years, I was 19 when I went into Vietnam, but I was a lot older than 20 when I left. And as Nicole pointed out, I've dealt with cancer 3 times. I've been through a lot. But if you can survive a war and walk out of that with all the parts and pieces that you walked into, you can deal with anything. Trust me, there's nothing, every Vietnam veteran in this room knows, there's nothing that's insurmountable once you've survived a war. It's pretty much a day at the beach. During the war, there were 2 swift boats that were in San Diego that were utilized for training. And after the war, we gave both of those swift boats to the nation of Malta. In 2011, their Secretary of Defense contacted us, and she asked us, hey, your swift boats are pretty well used up at this point, obviously, after that much passage of time. And she said, we're going to keep one for our museum. Would you guys want one? I said, yeah, of course we'd like a swift boat. So the short version of it was loaded onto a C-130 cargo plane, and it was flown to Virginia. And then we had it, what was left of it, put on a big rig and driven to San Diego. And the president of the Vietnam Veterans Group I'm in sent us out an email, and he said, we have a severely, heavily used swift boat that's in San Diego, and we need to restore it. So collectively, we need $140,000 for new engines and new wiring and this, that, and the other. So nobody said, you know, this might, they had change left over, was kind of the short version. And that swift boat is now very actively on display at the Maritime Museum of San Diego. Our next reunion for the group I'm in is going to be in San Diego in May of next year. And part of what we do when we're in that town is to take swift boats out on the bay. And the first time I had done that was the first time I've been on a swift boat since 1969. And we came back to where it was going to be docking, and then bring in the next bunch of us that wanted to go out on the first swift boat ride in many decades. And one of the guys yelled out to me, Tom, how was it? I said, Verge, it's great. You're going to love it. It's much more fun when nobody's shooting at you. So that's how that worked out. So yeah, there's one in one of those 2 swift boats is on display in a museum in Malta, and the other one is as I say, at the Maritime Museum in San Diego, and it's a very active part of that museum. They take it out a couple of times a day, And I wrote an article about it, and that's one of the other things you can see on my display. I wrote it for Sea Classics magazine. It's called Restoring a Swift Boat. It's the longest magazine article I've ever written. It was 14 pages. And when we got it, as I say, it was not in up and running condition. But with the group I'm in, we spent a lot of free man-hours restoring it, putting in new engines, rewiring it, everything. The Coast Guard wouldn't let us use real machine guns and real mortars for reasons that escape me. So, but there are replicas of it that are made out of rubber. But if you look at them, it's like, yeah, that looks exactly like what I remembered. So that was my experience with swift boats. And as I say, in looking at the pictures of the restoration, one of the things I noticed was how often the sailors that were working on them were they had a smile you couldn't pull down with a pry bar. These guys they were digging it. So one of the things I've learned is that to honor those that didn't make it back from swift boat operations or any involvement in Vietnam of any branch of the military. In my case, those sailors are still they're referred to as still being on patrol. So one of the things I've always believed, especially since surviving cancer for the 3rd time, is you got to live every day to the fullest to honor those veterans. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Had we finished the last minute of the video just to give you a visual, you would have seen that modern day amphibian operations are absolutely informed by the swift boat. In fact, I've had the opportunity to ride on a swift boat descendant in an anti-narco trafficking interdiction in South America. To have no real armored defense and to just have to be fast with a lot of firepower, that is a trade-off, and those are stakes that not everybody has to face or make. We have, in this theme of past to present, quite the privilege if our former American Legion Commander Terry Larson, where are you? There you are, has just been to Vietnam recently. And he is going to share some photos with us, and I think that can be really powerful. And I am going to set this up as you take the stage, Terry.
Hello? Okay, works fine. So, welcome everyone, and everyone up here on the dais so far has been top-notch, right? Family, the Lindberg family, Nicole, Tom, Terry, everybody's been really great. So, just before this starts, I want to say that back in 2019, my daughter, who had retired at the age of 44, I don't know. Anyway, she had all these air miles, and she said, Dad, I'd like to send you over to Vietnam if you want to go, and I'll join you. I said, well, yeah, maybe. Well, she went ahead and did it, and of course, what hit? COVID. So anyway, so didn't go in 2020, didn't go in 2021, didn't go in 2022. So this January I went, but her lifestyle changed and she was unable to go with me. So I went by myself. So that was 2019. So all of us who served in the military, from the day you signed up, you took the oath, all supported the United States and what we did in Vietnam. Whether it's right or wrong, that's what we did. So anyway, but the ones who served in country, I always say we earned a degree, an ABA, over in Vietnam. American Badass. So anyway, is that going to work or isn't it? So this is my picture from my hotel there.
What city?
Da Nang. I flew into Da Nang. So Da Nang, I went from Da Nang and north. So this is the view. I was talking to some Vietnam vets before. Oh, Marble Mountain. Five of them. So they said that there was a Viet Cong hospital in the Marble Mountains. This is the rock pile just north of Highway 9, as if you're going to go to heading towards Laos. This is Khe Sanh. They got a memorial there, and they've got some of our aircraft on display. You'll see the C-130 here shortly. Anyway, in that memorial, it's pro-Vietnam, so it's not, everything that you read through it and stuff is from their point of view, and which is, it's their country. So what I was going to say is about the talking about it, Vietnam, communist country, but it sure is capitalistic as far as I can tell. I mean, you got McDonald's, we got Marriott's, Hilton's, Hyatt's, Ramadas. You got lobster houses right next to it. Oh, you remember these? Okay, there's not very many there. They got tracked Kubota threshing that does the rice harvest now. This here, I did travel twice on swift boats. This is the Qua Viet River. This here's the South China Sea out there. That's, so anyway, there was none of this back then. This was all sand, no villages or anything, and now it's a fishing community. But twice I went up and down this river on swift boats. This here is Quang Tri, the citadel around Quang Tri. And that was 1973 is when they went through bad stuff. Now this is the moat around the Wei citadel. And most of now, the rest of it's going to be pretty much Wei. So this is, you see how they transport stuff there? They got a lot of trucks, a lot of motorbikes, a lot of cars. So right now from Hoi An up to Dong Ha, there's an expressway. No stop signs, no nothing. You can go from Hoi An up to Dong Ha. That's going to go all the way up to Hanoi and all the way down to Saigon once they get going again. So anyway, when I was there in 67, 68, there was no Highway 1. You'd come to the village, go to the next. Is that the last one? Okay. So let me... Robin Williams, huh? So anyway, that highway is going to go from all the way from Saigon up to Hanoi. It is Saigon, by the way. So anyway, Highway 1 and Highway 9, when I was there, you'd see a village occasionally. Right now on Highway 9, all the way from Qua Viet, which is on the South China Sea, all the way to the Laotian border, there's hardly an inch of land that doesn't have a building or like a house or a business all the way. Same way with Highway 1, all the way from Da Nang, all the way up to Dong Ha. There's not an inch. It's unbelievable. 1967, there was 35 million Vietnamese. There's over 100 million now. That's almost 3 times as much population as before we went. The United States, we have not even doubled in that same period of time. So it's a thriving area. And where that river was going out that I rode the swift boat, the Highway 9 ended at Dong Ha back then. 1997, they finally did the road all the way out to the South China Sea. So that's why we had to ride swift. There was no, unless you took a chopper, you know, so. So anyway, that concludes. I just wanted to show you some of what Vietnam's about now. And somebody said, well, it's not communist, it's not capitalist, it's ComCap. So, thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Ryan Carufa, are you here? Excellent. We've invited Ryan to the stage to make sure that you all know the latest from Washington County Veterans Services. Ryan, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Nicole. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ryan Carufel. I'm the Veteran Service Officer for Washington County here in the state of Minnesota. A little bit about our office, or about what we do. There is a County Veteran Service Office in each county in the state of Minnesota, and we help veterans connect with various benefits. Okay, so there's some things that have happened within the past year that you need to be aware about. Congress passed the PACT Act this last year in August, and the VA started to decide some of those claims earlier this year. So there's new presumed illnesses associated with Agent Orange exposure, along with new geographical regions too as well, in addition. So keep that in mind. I just wanted to take a minute and just let you know that. We have handouts in back, so please, at the very minimum, just grab a business card. And we have the presumptive illnesses as well in the back too. And take that on your way out. And if we'll be around for questions if you have individual questions, or if you're curious to find, if you're not from Washington County, you want to find your local veteran service officer, we can help with that. There's veteran service officers in Wisconsin too, if you're from Wisconsin. But here in Washington County, we have 3 offices. We have an office up in Forest Lake, in which Andrea Markham, which is in back right here, she staffs that office. We have one in Stillwater and one in Cottage Grove too as well. So we keep really busy. There's about 14,000 veterans in this county, but that doesn't include the reservists that we serve, the National Guard members, our active duty folks, our retirees, our survivors, and dependents too as well. So just keep that in mind. I appreciate the opportunity to come up and just say a minute about what we do. Thank you, Diane, for the invite. We'll never turn this opportunity down to get in front of this many veterans. So we'll be in back in case you have questions. Okay, thank you so much.
And don't leave before you've had a chance to look at the information and the displays here. We have 2, not just one, authors, well, we have a few more than that, authors in the audience, but Bill Straczynski's book, Care Under Fire, and Bill are both here. There he is. Dr. Ha Tong's book, Vietnam, Peace or Freedom, and he is here as well, which is just an incredibly special way to connect directly with both of your books, gentlemen. Before we close, we can't not thank the labor of love and all of those who love it, who bring this program to you every year. You know who you are. Diane Finneman, Shannon, Mark Finneman. I happen to know very intimately how much you put into this program, and I can see from quite a few faces how much it's appreciated. Thank you to the American Legion. And I love that we had to adapt, you know, lower stakes, much lower stakes, but it wouldn't be fitting for a Vietnam Veterans commemoration program if we didn't have a few things go awry. Thank you, Jerry Peltier, for solving under under blown fuses, if not fire, some things for us today. And as I invite Jerry up to help us close this program, along with Chaplain Miller to then retire the colors. I hope that you know how much you mean to me and to so many. I know that today many of us are worried about our country's future, about our children's future. It feels like we're in a time of pretty great political turmoil again. But I am filled with optimism when I look around at this room and I see an 18-year-old. More than a few of you were Jacob's age when you went to Vietnam. In the room to hear your stories, to commemorate you, to learn from you. You are adapters, survivors, but you're also innovators, and most of you got really funny along the line. All of you, are already paying forward what is still owed to you. And while we may never get there and fully ever pay you what you're owed, what a great honor and privilege it is to serve a country where I can look at faces who do that. Thank you so much. Mr. Peltier, bring us home, please, won't you?
Apologize for all of the squeals and barks and bumps in that sound system earlier, but technology, it'll let you down at the worst time. So thank all of you for coming. Your remarks just prior to my closing song here is, you said have hope to look ahead. Just like the sunrise behind the mountain. You see the light, but you know the sun is coming. So let's ask the Lord to bless our country. We have faith that he'll do it. He's done it before. He'll do it again. We make some mistakes and it shows up, but he'll bail us out. Takes faith. Please stand and join me in singing a closing prayer song, God Bless America. Cover. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her with that light that will shine from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the ocean, white would foam. God bless America, our home, sweet home. God bless America, our home, sweet home. God bless all of you and your families. Have a safe weekend. Thank you.
Cover, and let's retire our colors of our nations in place. Hand salute. 2. Thank you all for coming. God bless.